All right, so today we are starting a new series, as I mentioned before. The series is called Dangerous Prayer. But now it sounds like dangerous, you're like, oh, dangerous could be reckless. And we're not talking about reckless prayer, we're talking about dangerous prayer. But it's danger in a good way. Because a lot of times, things that we do pray are good, right? We say, God bless us, or God be with us on give us safety on our journey. Like, these are all good prayers, but they're safe. They're ones that we would pray generally for anybody and everything. These are where we say still predictable, right? They're generic, they're predictable, they're safe. So when we're talking about dangerous prayer today, when we're going to be talking about dangerous prayer just for the next 3 weeks, and then we are going to shift into something new, but more on that later. Dangerous prayer should bring us to a place where we're saying we're out of our comfort zone and we're in a place that we're saying, God, I am now open to what you have for me. God, this is not comfortable for me to be here, and this is why I'm going to be in that space. And so throughout this series, we're going to ask God to search us, to break us, and to send us. And we're going to see why we're going to start with searching before we're asking God to break us. Because if we don't know the things that are within us, or if we're saying I've been keeping it, then there's not a reason for God to break us, and then there wouldn't be a reason for God to send us. And so this is where we're going to start today in Psalm 139. Laura just read it just a moment ago from the worship team. But a little bit of background on Psalm 139. This is a Psalm of David. This is a Psalm of David after he is being chased by his enemies, and even often, as you might look at it, an enemy of God, as they are after a servant of God who is only there to be able to try to be able to put in place things that are good, things that are pleasing to God. So if you're thinking about it in this way, and these same enemies are also accusing David of saying, you don't know what you're doing. You're going after things that are not of God. So they're even accusing David of having a wrong motive. So David could go one of two ways, right? He could say, smite these enemies of mine, and let's just move on. But you see, David ends the psalm because human thought, human feelings can really take a hold of us. And we can say, God, I want what I want, and I want you to do this. I want you to take care of these enemies. I want you to remove them. But this is ultimately what he says. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Now, this is what I want you to do. Say that with me. Ready? Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Why is this a dangerous prayer? Because God might answer it. And if God answers it, then we're probably going to be in a different position before God. So as we think about it this way, we're going to go over a couple of points here. So the first one we're doing is we're asking God to search our hearts. Search my heart, God. Now, this is where we're going to jump to Jeremiah real quick, because Jeremiah has a little thing, and he talks about the human heart. Jeremiah 17, verse 9. This is what God says about the human heart. He says, the human heart is the most deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Who really knows how bad it is? So what are we looking at when Jeremiah says it? He says we need to understand the condition of the human heart. The condition of the human heart is deceitfully wicked. There's something wrong with our heart especially when we are far from God. When we are going about our own way, when we are trying to be able to do our own thing, we're saying we are disregarding God and what God has for us, and we are trying to go about it in our own way. This is where Jeremiah is telling each of us today. He's saying, be careful as you are going your own way, following your heart, because when you're following your heart, remember, this is a place of deceitfulness. The heart can be an idol factory. Meaning what? It means that in our hearts, we are going to be following all kinds of things. We're going to say, ooh, money. Just had a conversation, I'm not going to say with who because I don't want to divulge any of this, but they said, you know what, like, hey, I'm not going to come to church, I've got work to do. I've got jobs, I've got things. And I said, okay. And they're like, well, and they said it almost in a joking manner. They said, well, I hope God's not going to be mad at me. And I said, well, you're showing your priorities right now. Your priorities currently are money first, because I have the opportunity to make money, so I'm going to take that first, and then God will come after. You can kind of see the reason why I said I'm not going to reveal a person's name. Because when it kind of points out to us, and I'm not saying it's that single person that's flawed, it is an example of what we do with God. This is the reason why we're saying, God, search my heart, because we're saying, I have many priorities that come before God. I'm going to prioritize my sleep. I'm going to prioritize my schedules. I'm going to prioritize my sporting events. I'm going to prioritize, and you can fill in the blank with whatever idleness comes out of your heart to be able to say, I'm going to put all of these things before God. You can do that. This is the whole thing about free will. We get to choose. We get to say, you know what, I'm not going to follow and have God be my first priority. I'm going to have God be my third, fourth, or fifth. How many of you tell lies? Anybody ever told a lie before? All right, so what we know is that everybody has told lies before. And usually the lies that we do tell and the lies that we definitely believe are the lies that we tell ourselves. Yes, we lie about other things as well. Yes, we can lie about where I'm going to be or what I'm going to do, and we can lie about that. But usually the lies are the ones that we try to tell ourselves. I don't have an anger problem. I just get angry sometimes. It's not gossip if I'm just talking to somebody about, hey, make sure you put this on your prayer list and let me tell you the whole thing. I'm just asking somebody to pray for them, like, really? Or is it, do you want to get the gossip out? I don't have a problem with lust. I simply look at the human form, and it's so beautiful that why wouldn't I want to just stare at it? I don't have any problems with priority because, of course, I need to make money. Money's going to help me live. Money's going to help me do everything that I need to do and get everything accomplished that I need accomplished. So it's really not a priority issue. You see the lies that we try to tell ourselves, that the ones that try to stick in us, that we say, really, there is no problem. I don't have to bring these things to God because I don't have a problem. And so what do? We just say, God, just know the problems that I want to put out there. Those ones you can deal with. While the rest go hidden. The rest go under the surface. Nobody's going to know because there's no problem. Search me, know my heart. Because search me means that God is going to point out things that are not pure in us. Are we actually ready to be able to pray that? God, search me. Know my heart. Why is this so dangerous? Because we're saying if we're asking God to do what only God can do, and then we're saying, but God, don't do it. God, search me and know my heart is a dangerous prayer because guess what? The things that we ask for, God is going to do. God, point out in me the things that haven't been good. God, point out the things in me where I need to be able to change. God, take my priorities and don't just align them to what I see as best, but take my priorities and align them to what you see is best. So we also see David, he goes into the next part. So Psalm 139, 23, 24. Search me, O God, and know my heart. And this is where he says, test me and know my anxious thoughts. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Anxiety is fear. And so what we do in this second point is we say, God, reveal my fears to me. Here's the part about anxiety and here's the part about fear. We dismiss it pretty easily because what we do say is, oh, everybody's going to be fearful about this, and so there's no reason for me to deal with it. Everybody fears standing up in public and speaking, right? Public speaking's number 2 fear. You remember what the number 1 fear is? Death. Right? So you're like, oh, well, everybody fears death, and everybody fears public speaking, and everybody fears, or you just pick the anxiety or fear that you're currently working with, and what you usually say is, well, everybody's going to deal with this. There's no real problem. I just have to figure it out for myself. This was a key point that I found this week as I was working through this, is that what we fear most reveals where we trust God the least. Consider that for a second. This, to me, is profound. What we fear most is where we trust God the least. So, what are we going to do with this? This is it right here. And let me just give you a moment of clarity from me. What I fear most is failing, letting people down and feeling inadequate. Maybe some people join me in this, but here's the thing. What I'm going to go back to is the first point that I just told you, is I can't dismiss it because somebody else might share it. I fear letting people down. I fear the inadequacy. I don't want to feel inadequate. I don't want to feel like I'm letting people down. And so what do? I react out of fear. I react out of this anxiety. I react out of this place where I'm saying I'm only acting out of fear. So what am I actually fearing? I'm saying, God, you are not going to do the job that I need you to do. God, you're not going to be able to do the things in me and around me that I see as adequate. So I don't trust God with these fears. I don't trust God to do the work outside of me that needs to be done in others. And you see, that's the part when you're looking at your fear, when you're looking at your anxiety, And those are the things that we are directly at points to where we think God is not going to do the work. What are your fears and anxieties today? Where are the places where you need to be able to say to God, search me and know my heart. And if there is anything anxious in me, reveal it. Reveal my fear, reveal my anxiety, because this is the place where we can go to God and say, help me to trust you with this. Instead of me just worrying, me just living in fear, God, help me to trust you. And so we need to love pleasing and obeying God more than we have a fear of failing, fear of whatever it is, fill in the blank with your fear and anxieties. We need to be able to say, God, I want to please you and do the things that you're calling me to. Because when you know me, when you've searched me, when you know my heart, help me to be able to live in that instead of living out of fear. There's so many places and times that as we react out of fear, that we live in fear, that it always leads to something that is not good. When we react out of fear, then we are pointing it towards others, and then we are lashing out, we're taking it out, and we can't live in that fear. 1 John. 1 John, as John speaks here in his first letter, 1 John 4:18, and this is what it says, such love has no fear, because perfect love expels all fear. If we are afraid, it is for fear of punishment, and this shows that we have not fully experienced his perfect love. Perfect love drives out all fear. Think about it in that way. Where does the perfect love shown to us? The perfect love is shown to us here as John even highlights it in this chapter and especially in this book, in this first letter of his. He is talking about the unfailing love of God. He's saying this is how we know what love is that Christ died for us, that Christ rose again for us. And if this perfect love that God had for us, even while we were yet enemies, even though we were yet sinners, that still Christ died for us. When we know this perfect love, it's going to drive out the fear and the anxieties in our life. But we have to ask God, search me, reveal my fear. And then we're going to ask God to also do this, and this is where it gets real uncomfortable. Uncover my sin. Uncover it. What does that mean, uncovering my sin, uncovering your sin? We're asking God to reveal our hearts, to reveal our sin. And that sin is the stuff that we try to be able to keep hidden. It's not the sin that we don't mind telling a few people about to pray for us. Like, I'm having a hard time making decisions. I'm having a hard time with this. Hey, just pray for me on this. Or, hey, you know what? Like, I said a mean word the other day. And so just, forgive, like I'm just asking, like I'm putting it out there. I said a mean thing. Just help me to understand I shouldn't talk mean that way. Right? We try to be able to sanitize it for the people in our lives. We try to be able to say, here's the sin that I'd like to reveal to you, but I'm going to keep all these other ones to myself, because if I tell you these things about me, then you're not going to love me anymore. Have you had that feeling when you're talking amongst the body of believers, brothers and sisters in Christ, when you're saying, hey, we should be holding each other accountable, we should be talking about these things together, and yet somehow, what do? We say, God, I can't reveal that. That's a little bit too much. They're going to look at me and they're going to run. But it's the same thing we do with God. In our head and in our hearts, we know that God knows everything. Amen? Right? We know that God knows everything. But somehow in the midst of this, we still think that if I keep some things secret before God, He's not going to know them. If I tell everything to God, somehow God's not going to love me anymore. And so these are the things that we need to say, God, uncover my sin. Release it. I don't want to keep it anymore. Here's some questions to ask in this process. What are others trying to tell me that I haven't been able to hear? Because here's the thing. Some of our sin is easily seen by others and not seen to ourselves. Some of the things like anger and lashing out, some of the things like, passive-aggressive comments, some of the things like, showing a lot of like these directions, words that we speak towards others, things that are happening in that way. Some of times we don't even recognize our own anger and our own words that we're speaking and things that we're saying. Like we don't even see it. What we need is sometimes somebody to say, hey, let me just tell you, like I noticed that these are some things that you were saying or things that you were doing that were showing some things that are not good to others. And what do we usually do? Which leads into the next question. We try to rationalize it. We try to be able to say, no, that's not so bad. Why? Because we would say, hey, when I'm driving, of course I'm going to be angry. Have you ever, drove in Chicago with other people on the road? Like, this is impossible not to be angry and lash out while I'm driving. It's a rationalization. We say, God, no, that's not anger in me. That's just anger because of them. Where's the anger coming from? We want to rationalize all of this sin because it's easier for us to be able to deal with it if we're saying, but it's not so bad. I know somebody else that it's way worse in. I know somebody else that has that problem over there. You see, it's easy for us because rationalization says it's not so bad here in me, but it really is bad somewhere else. It's the reason why we need to be able to hear these questions, because what are we trying to be able to push away when others are trying to tell us? Where have we been trying to rationalize it? And here's the big thing. Where am I most defensive? So when I point out, let's look at your priorities. So, well, but I'm in church like 80% of the time at least. Rationalizing and even defensive. Let me defend my reason. Let me I'm going to tell you why, even if it's something right off the top of our head. We're going to defend it, we're going to rationalize it, and we're not going to hear it. Where are you the most defensive when it's trying to be having somebody or something, even God, point out our sin? Where are we the most defensive in our actions and in our emotions? Those are going to be places that God's trying to point out in you and in me. Because I too see these things in me. This is a natural part of, like, the human nature. We don't like when somebody's pointing out our wrong. We don't like going and finding out that we are not perfect. That somebody is trying to be able to point out in us something that's wrong. And we're like, no, this isn't good. This isn't well. Let me try to be able to defend it, to rationalize it. And I'm going to be able to do that to my last breath. Why? Because I am so stubborn. When we're asking God to search us, to know our hearts, to reveal our fear and anxiety, to uncover our sin, it's dangerous. Because all of this is hard to see in ourselves. This is why we need others. This is why we need a Christian community. This is why we need fellow brothers and sisters who are following Jesus to be able to say, help me. This is what we get to in the mix of saying, I want to follow Jesus. I want Jesus to have other people surround me as well, because I know that I can't do this alone. Because in this, we are saying, God, I want to be open to where it is that I have gone off the rails. Where is it in me that I need help? And when we ask, God is going to do it. We're going to say, God, search me, know me, reveal to me my fear and anxiety, and show me my sin. Because this leads us to our last point, where in that Psalm 139 is that he says, and lead me to this everlasting path, a path of righteousness. Because here's the part about it. When God shows us where we're wrong, when God shows us where our heart needs to change, when God shows us that we have parts in us that need to be cleansed by the blood of the Lamb, there's only one way that we can go. It's to God. Pointing out our sin does not say, ooh, now I just need to do better and to be better and to just, get all this stuff in order and just kind of to try to make myself good. No, we can't make ourselves good. But what we can first do is say, God, we know that we need you. We know that we need you to come and to intervene where we're trying to do it on our own. God, we need to know your forgiveness first. We need to know where it is, God, that you are working in us so that we're not trying to ignore it, so that we're not trying to be defensive about it. But God, point out in us what needs to be done. You see, we're driving this need towards something bigger than ourselves. This need is driving us to the cross. This need is driving us to Christ, who at the cross shed his blood for us, who at the cross died in our place, who went to hell in our place, who rose again in glory and says, this now is yours. Freedom. victory, forgiveness, life, salvation. You see, this dangerous prayer will show you your need, and then we'll take that need to Christ. You see, we don't pray it not knowing if there's an answer, not knowing if there's a solution, not knowing if there's, even because it could just drive us into more fear and drive us into more anxiety and drive us into more away from God. And yet here's the thing, in this dangerous prayer, when we're asking God to search us, to know us, to reveal our anxiety and our fear, to reveal the sin, it's all for the purpose of driving us to Jesus. To say, we know that we need you because we can't do this by ourselves. So, I'm going to ask this week, even today if you wanted to start, to say, God, search me, know me, reveal my fear, reveal my sin, and lead me to you. Are you ready to pray this dangerous prayer? If not, keep praying. If not, you're going to say, God, help me to be able to want you to search me and know me. But we're going to put some stuff out this week, even as a reminders on social media and places where you can be reminded, all right, it's time to pray this dangerous prayer, God, search me and know me, and lead me to that path of everlasting life. In Jesus' name.